Wonderful. Okay. Hi, Muheeb. Welcome to Changemakers show. I think we are live streaming on our page for sure. I'm just going to double check and share it into our group. But while I check on that, I'd love to welcome you here today. And we are cross global today. It's afternoon for me in Canada, and it's bright and early in Brisbane, Australia for you this morning. So thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks for having us. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today.
Wonderful. So you have a lot of exciting things going on with your social enterprise called the Pluralist. So we're going to get into some of the details there. But I guess to kick us off, it'd be great for you just to introduce yourself and maybe how you got started down this path. And then we'll get into the details of what the Pluralist is and how that all is working right now as well. But how did you get inspired to work on this social enterprise?
Sure. So I've always been interested in different languages and different cultures. I was extremely fortunate as a growing up. I'm originally from Bangladesh. And as a teenager, I moved to Thailand and I grew up there. And in my young adult life, I moved to Australia. So I've had like exposure to various different cultures, different languages. And so I was always fascinated by that. And it is that fascination for language and culture I realized as I was working. I finished my degrees and I started working in my professional life. I was looking at just our surrounding and the representation of the diversity that's around us in our everyday things like your clothes, the accessories, and the movies that you watch. And I realized that, the world is a lot more interconnected than we really think. So our languages have always borrowed from each other, that human civilizations of the past, as they work with each other, we have done a lot better than we worked separately. And so I wanted to bring this message across. I wanted to bring it through a product that people wear on a daily basis. And of course, I love watches. So I thought, why not implement that into a watch and use it for some social good and some impact? And, the Pluralist was born. So that's how I got started with this project.
That's fabulous. It's really inspiring because it's concepts that are definitely at the forefront, especially more recently as our world becomes smaller and smaller and we're more connected. But this is the first time I've seen an initiative quite like this. And I think it's really cool that you've brought that value and that perspective into something like an everyday object, like a watch. It's very innovative and yet very simple, which is often the best ideas.
That's right. It was quite straightforward, and I looked at the watch industry and I saw that it wasn't actually there because all the watches that were represented had one set of characters borrowing from one language, and the other one was the Roman numerals. But it didn't actually portray all the other languages that were used by everybody else. People in countries like Japan and Korea still wore watches that had either Roman numerals or just like, how you have just dots and lines as such. So there was no representation. And it's always nice to have that representation. I mean, you don't actually need to know the language to read the watch, to understand it. However, varying it, what I found is that people just start up a conversation. They'll just look at your watch and they'll be like, oh, that's really cool. What language is that? It essentially breaks down barriers and sparks conversation. That's the whole mission for the Pluralist as well.
That's great. And you kind of touched on this, but can you speak more to how that kind of tangible benefit of this product connects into, I guess you explained it, but that vision for a better world is really about breaking down the barriers then, or is there more to your vision for what the Pluralist can help contribute to the conversation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a background on how the modern numerals came about. Do you know how they came around?
No, I have no idea anything about any of this. This is fascinating.
Yeah. So in the past, we were using the Roman numerals to measure, to trade as currency, for currency valuation. So it was during the trading period back in the day between the old Middle Eastern civilizations and the old South Asian or the Indian civilizations at the time. The Middle Eastern civilizations came up with the numbers 1 to 9. They didn't have the 0 or the decimal point. When they were trading with the Indian civilization, they then realized, or as traders and as scholars connected between the two civilizations, they came up with the 0 and the decimal point and created the numerals that we use today. And it was Fibonacci, when he was trading in the Middle East, found this new set of numerals and took it back to Europe. And the rest is history. And this is the modern set of numbers that we use throughout the world at this very time. So me and you Skyping on a computer, it all came about from that 0 and that 1.
Right, yeah.
Which I thought was extremely fascinating. People don't know about this, but it is a perfect example of what happens when civilizations via trade exchange ideas, and we do a lot better when we are together and collaborating than when we are not. And this essentially is the message that I want to, in a subtle manner, get across. This is my vision for the Pluralist. I want all the numbers, the numeral characters from all the different languages to be represented in my watch collection. And in the future, I would like to give out, as people purchase a watch, like a little book that kind of explains where the numbers are coming from, what they represent, hoping that it would just break down barriers and it'll spark conversation. And, we'll have a better understanding of history and how truly interconnected we as human beings are. And we can appreciate each other's backgrounds a lot better and really embrace diversity,
Yeah, that's amazing. I had no idea that was kind of the history. And I love that story because, like you said, it really highlights how much stronger we can be as societies and people and geographic, all the culture and context. When we collaborate and communicate together, we can come up with these new ideas, like adding the 0 and the 1, which obviously makes everything work a lot better. Yeah, that's amazing. And just the idea of putting that big of a vision into such a simple conversation piece is a really neat idea. So we're curious, and I say we because my team member helped me come up with some of these questions, and this is a wonderful question for you, and that is, how did you decide which languages to start with your collection? So, and maybe we can backtrack a little bit and let people know that you're in the middle of a crowdfunding campaign right now, and you have a couple collections to kick off this whole social enterprise. So yeah, how did you go through the process of deciding where to start? Because there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I think one of my inspirations, so currently we've got 2 collections that we are selling on from our website. Now, when I was starting this project last year in November, the entire project is bootstrapped by myself. So I couldn't kind of have multiple different collections. I wanted to start off with one language and see how people react to it and what's the uptake in the market. And I started with the Eastern Arabic numeral. So that's my Arabia collection. And the reason that I chose the Eastern Arabia numeral is because exactly of the story that I told you. Mm-hmm. Essentially because behind that numeral is a grander kind of message that those mm-hmm. numerals represent all the numerals of the world. So I decided to go with the Eastern Arabic first and call my first collection Arabia. And then after about 4 or 5 months of really good feedback from people, and I had a lot of requests to add additional numerals. And as my sales were going through, I had enough funds to add a second one. And so I decided to go with the Sino-Japanese index markers. And I chose that one because I had a lot of people request that from me as well. And I found they looked great. So, I mean, I'm wearing them right now. They're one of my favorite ones. And essentially what I'm aiming to do with the crowdfunding, because I've had requests for representation from other languages, is that it should speed up the process of that. So then if I'm able to meet my target, what I will do is add additional languages and expand on the watch collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I mean, because you have this diversity message at heart, but at the same time, running a successful business, you can't do everything all at once. So there's a bit of a process there to bring on new collections and keep that conversation going still.
That's right.
So how is your crowdfunding campaign going? You're right in the middle of it now. So we've talked to a couple, well, at least one social entrepreneur, Tony Lloyd, who was after his crowdfunding campaign for his podcast, turning into a radio show. And so he shared some learnings there, but I'm sure there's lots of other people in our community who are wanting to do a crowdfunding campaign at some point. So it'd just be great to hear your general perspective being in the middle of it right now. I know you can't draw all the conclusions yet, but what's your advice and your experience so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you how I got started with the campaign, and I've got about 9 days left. So what my experience is halfway.
Mm-hmm.
At this stage, we are more than 50% funded. So
Awesome. Congrats.
We are quite close to meeting our tipping point. Fingers crossed. Let's see what happens. But getting started, I decided to do the campaign fairly late, because I released my kanji numerals, which is the kanji collection of watches, which is the Sino-Japanese ones. And right after releasing that, I got a lot of requests for additional ones. So there was good feedback from the community, from my fellow pluralists, as I call them, who were like, look, we want more, and can you add additional languages? So I was really considering crowdfunding as a way to do it. And as I was doing my research, the thing for me was to choose a kind of the appropriate platform, because there's a lot of crowdfunding platforms out there. I mean, of course, the popular ones are Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Everybody uses that. And I had my eyes on them, and I did a lot of research. However, I came across Start Some Good. And I thought it kind of aligned really well with our brand and what we stood for. It's a great platform for social entrepreneurs, for NGOs, and just people doing fundraising with a social cause or a social message. And I decided to get started and so I gave myself 3 weeks to get the whole campaign ready. So got my friends together. We shot our pitch, shot the video. It was my advice would be to give yourself at least a month. I felt like I was 1 week short. I should have given myself a month. But however, I like to work under pressure and under deadline. So kind of worked out well for me. I was quite happy. I'm actually very happy with how the campaign turned out. And as soon as we got started, it kicked off. It started off very well. And throughout the campaign, you'll have to be extremely active. I definitely advise that. Social media, reach out to people, your contacts, every day. So you cannot just take a day off as a campaign goes on. So I see a lot of people run campaigns for 2-3 months. Personally, I think that's quite long, because I realize the amount of energy that goes every day into the campaign. So I would say keep it in short, between 30 to 40 days max. That's my kind of conclusion at this very stage.
Yeah, definitely. And I've heard that before from other people. It's definitely a commitment to tackle a crowdfunding campaign. In some ways, you can kind of leverage the crowd, but it's a lot of momentum from within as well. And that helps kind of build the reach and get that snowball. But you got to push the snowball down the hill in order to get it going and keep pushing it. And it props to you for being diligent in your reaching out efforts. And that's how you ended up with me today on the show. So there's proof that, you keep reaching out, and you never know kind of how things shake out. Because you actually reached out to Solen directly, and then we kind of said, hey, do you want to come on the show? Which is kind of a different thing, but still getting your word out in a bigger way. Hopefully, we're contributing to the snowball in some way today.
Absolutely, and the other thing that I didn't plan plan on or expect was the connections that I would make throughout the campaign with other entrepreneurs. And one
Mm.
of my challenges was to connect with other social entrepreneurs and impact makers or change makers. And this has forced me to do that. And I'm extremely grateful to be able to do that. I'm meeting people. I mean, of course, being on this show and meeting you and your team, which has been amazing. I've also connected with multiple other people and the amazing work that they're doing. Because I'm so active on a daily basis, I'm talking to these people regularly, building a connection, and it's quite inspiring as well. So I would definitely recommend crowdfunding. There's a lot of advantages other than raising funds, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. Thanks for sharing that while you're in the thick of it. So if we kind of step back into your journey as a social entrepreneur and yourself as a person. So on the show, we like to get into some questions to help us get to know people as people too, because we can talk strategy and business and impact. And of course, we love all of those things. But at the end of the day, everybody's a person who's who's passionate about their project, their cause, their company. So what we'd love to ask, just what gets you really fired up when you're working on this? Like where does the fire in your belly come from as it relates to getting this off the ground? Because there's a lot that goes into it, and people wouldn't take on these challenges if they weren't really motivated. So what's your motivation?
Well, making an impact definitely one of my big motivations. But in terms of the Pluralist, I'll give you an example. One thing that gets me going all the time is when I'm out on the street and about, and people are looking at my watches, and they make a compliment or they ask a question about, oh, what is that? What numbers are these? I'll give you a great example. I travel fairly a lot in general, travel a lot. And I was flying from Kathmandu to Delhi, Delhi to Colombo in Sri Lanka. And on my flight from Delhi to Sri Lanka, there was an elderly lady sitting on my right-hand side. And I was wearing my watch with the Sino-Japanese numbers. And right after food, she was like pointing at me. And she pointed at me, and I realized I thought she was pointing at my food, but she was actually pointing at my watch. And she was like, oh, what is that? And I was like, oh, it's this, the meaning behind the Pluralist and what we stand for. And that in the future, we would love to represent Sinhalese numbers, numerals. And she was really fascinated by it. And she gave me really great positive feedback. And we connected over our shared conversation about history and languages and my appreciation for the diversity of languages. And it's exactly moments like that fire me up. It reminds me why I'm doing what I'm doing. Our purpose is to break down barriers, spark conversation, and it happens quite often. When I'm wearing other watches, or whenever other Pluralists are out there with the watches, they always email me or give me feedback. They're like, oh, I was wearing the watch, or someone from this country looked at the watch and they were like, oh, that's so great. Because people like seeing a bit of themselves on somebody else, and it connects you. So, for example, if I'm on a train and someone from Japan looks at the watch, it might intrigue them. They might even feel a little bit comfortable, like, oh, great. And it's a great way to start a conversation, to get to know someone from a different culture, a different country as well. So it's those types of interactions that fire me up to make sure that the Pluralist is going and we are doing what we are doing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It all comes down, at the end of the day, these conversations and connections are really, our whole day is made up of those interactions. And so that's really where kind of the special moments show up. So it's a great example of that.
Yeah.
So what do you do differently than most other people? Where's your kind of unique angle on tackling growing a project like this? It's always interesting to ask this question and see kind of how all of us, being very diverse and unique, kind of bring a different secret sauce to the table in order to get things off the ground. So what do you think is your unique perspective on things?
Yeah, my secret sauce.
Yeah.
So I like to think I've got two. So I
Perfect.
think the first being is I worked in the private sector for a very long time. I'm an education professional, education industry professional with background in sales and marketing. And I bring the private sector's kind of mentality of go getting and extremely operational and driven into the social entrepreneur sector. I think I borrow a lot of my processes and my procedures from there. I think that gives me a little bit of an edge from someone from a professional business background. And the other thing is, of course, my background. I speak multiple different languages, and I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to travel around and meet different people. So it allows me to have a unique perspective in approaching an issue or a struggle or any project that I take up. So I think those are my two secret sauces. I'd like to think so, at least.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great. And so this is a question from our community ninja, Mariana, who helped prep you for us to meet today. And this is an awesome question that we always love to ask our guests. And that is, what is your advice for other social entrepreneurs who might be nearing kind of this stage in their business, or even at any stage? Like, what would you pass on to other impact entrepreneurs who are excited to make a difference with their initiatives?
Yeah. My advice to everybody would be, or other entrepreneurs definitely would be, to just get started and get started with the conversation. You don't have to actually get the project up and running. If you have an idea that you want to bring to life, my advice is to go out and just start talking about it. Because the moment you start talking about it, it becomes reality. And you will definitely take more steps to achieving your goals and getting that project started, whatever it may be. So go out there, start talking about it. That's a great first step.
That's wonderful. Yeah, instead of getting paralyzed by decisions and thinking and kind of living in your own bubble, like, you get so inspired when you have those conversations and get out to just, that's the first step of momentum, right? And then you can build from there.
Exactly. And, I found that people are extremely, your friend circle or your networks or your colleagues, they will usually be intrigued with the conversation such as that, and that you're taking initiative to do good. Everybody likes to see that. So from my experience is that people take it extremely positively. So no idea is a bad idea. If you've got a good idea that wants to make an impact, go for it. Ideally, my long-term goal as a social entrepreneur is, I believe that the only valid business model should be a social business model. And, we should all work towards achieving that or promoting that, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Len and I at Changemakers Association definitely share that. Our kind of big, hairy, audacious goal would be that there is no need for kind of specialized social entrepreneurship conversations or training or anything, because it's just baked into every organization to have that sustainability and impact operating from the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that. Whether that's also partnering with external NGOs or supporting them. So the Pluralist partners with the Asylum Seeker Resource Center. And give $5 from each watch sale to them. Every time a watch is sold, we donate $5 to the organization. They're doing some amazing work as well.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing this initiative with everybody. And I'm sure that there's other people who would agree with me when I say, like, when I saw this when I looked up the Pluralist and saw what you were up to, I thought, well, that's such a cool idea that I never would have thought of. And yet I personally really value that conversation it can bring about as well. And so every opportunity we have to, connect with others from different backgrounds and see where the shared experiences are and see where there's differences, like, that's an amazing conversation to have. So thank you so much. And how can people get in touch or check you out? Where should they, maybe they should go to Start Some Good right now.
So please check out our crowdfunding campaign, startsomegood.com and /the Pluralist Watches. or if you just type in the Pluralist Start Some Good on Google, it'll pop up. If you can make a pledge or share it with the network, we'd really appreciate that. The best way to get in contact with me is through my website, www.thepluralist.com.au. My contact details are on there, email address. You can connect to us through Facebook, Instagram, and shoot us a message. I'm really happy to connect. I'm happy to Skype, chat more about the Pluralist, but also I'm happy to chat about many other things. So as you can see, I love connecting, and I'm really enjoying my time connecting with other entrepreneurs right now.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much. Plus, you're in Changemakers Lab group right now, which this video will be in there as well. So people can, I'm sure, tag you there. And if they have any other questions after we wrap up here, we can reach back out to you as well. But we wish you the best of luck with the rest of your campaign, and of course, continued success after that. And you'll have to keep us updated on any kind of new insights as you wrap up your campaign, and also as you release new collections. Let us know in the lab, and I'm sure people would be interested to see where you're headed and what you're working on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danielle. I'll definitely do that.
Wonderful. And just for anybody watching the replay, whether it's on YouTube or our website or on Facebook, if you want to get notified about other awesome guests that we have on this show on a pretty regular basis, most Wednesdays, then you can sign up at www.changemakersassociation.com/show, and we'll hook you up with an email to announce the guests that we have coming up, and you can join us on our live shows or catch the replays. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and thanks Muheeb for being here today, and all the best. We'll stay in touch.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay, bye.